A blinding white light, sharp and clinical, illuminated the steel table in operating room 3. The rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitor was the only sound in the sterile silence, a monotonous heartbeat counting down to a discovery that defied belief. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, senior surgeon at St. Matthew's Medical Center, Chicago, moved with practiced, confident precision, her hands deep within the abdomen of the anesthetized patient. It was a routine gallbladder removal, the kind of simple operation she could perform in her sleep. But then, her scalpel scraped against something hard, something alien. Her hand froze. The intern assisting her saw the sudden halt and the microscopic shift in her posture. "Problem, Dr. Rodriguez," he whispered, his voice barely disturbing the silence. She didn't answer. Slowly, meticulously, she peeled back the tissue. It wasn't a stone or a misplaced clamp or any biological anomaly. It was a rectangle, encased in surgical gauze, yellowed and fused slightly to the surrounding fat tissue. Rodriguez delicately lifted the object with forceps. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. She unwrapped the gauze. It was a hospital ID card. The laminated plastic was instantly recognizable. The photo showed a man with an earnest, intense gaze. The name printed beneath it was impossible. Dr. Adrian Holt, trauma surgery. A cold, undeniable certainty settled over the room, chilling the blood of everyone present. It wasn't a mistake. The name belonged to a doctor who had vanished 5 years earlier, swallowed whole by the vast, uncaring landscape of the city, never to be seen again. The monitors continued their relentless beeping, but the focus had shattered. The ID card, sealed inside a living human being for half a decade, was a ghost in their hands. What would you do if you found evidence of a missing person, an apparent victim, hidden inside a patient on your operating table? This wasn't just a relic. This was a message. This was a truth buried alive. Could it mean that someone inside this very hospital knew what happened to Dr. Holt all along? And if they did, were they in this building right now? 5 years before that shocking discovery, Dr. Adrian Holt was at the zenith of his career. At 38, he was one of St. Matthew's most respected trauma surgeons. A meticulous, almost obsessive man whose dedication often meant the difference between life and death. He lived for the adrenaline of the ER. Thriving in the chaos, he could transform into order. He was married to the brilliant Dr. Emily Carter, a forensic pathologist whose steady, analytical nature was the perfect anchor to his high-strung intensity. They had a daughter, a small, vibrant girl whose laughter filled their immaculate Chicago home. Adrian had it all: success, love, and a professional life built on saving others. But that perfection had a hairline fracture running through it. St. Matthew's Medical Center was a sprawling, competitive environment, and in the quiet hours after midnight, Adrian had begun to see things the rest of the staff ignored. Subtle errors in patient files, strangely expedited transfers, and a chilling pattern in the unclaimed cadaver disposal reports. He grew stressed, his usual focused energy turning into a coiled anxiety. He would stay late, long after his shift ended, poring over digital records. "I can't shake it, Em," he told his wife one night, the city lights reflecting in the weary glass of his study window. "There's a smell of rot in the administration. They're hiding something big." His quiet conflicts with hospital administration, particularly senior administrator Dr. Leonard Voss, grew sharper. Adrian was the kind of man who would refuse to let things go, a dangerous trait when faced with powerful secrets. Then, in June 2018, Dr. Adrian Holt worked his final shift. He walked out of the hospital, exchanging a brief nod with the night security guard. His car was found 2 days later, abandoned near the unforgiving expanse of Lake Michigan. No struggle, no witnesses. Phone and wallet missing. A life, meticulously constructed, suddenly erased. The police quickly categorized it as a high-stress disappearance, perhaps suicide. His wife, Emily, knew better. Her Adrian, for all his stress, would never leave his daughter. But police later found something in his office that made them question if he'd really just vanished or if someone wanted him gone. The discovery in Adrian's locked office was a single, encrypted flash drive, hidden deep inside a hollowed-out medical textbook. It was the only tangible trace of the man left behind. When Emily finally managed to decrypt the files, a grueling process only a forensic expert could manage, what she found confirmed her darkest suspicions. The files contained whistleblower-style evidence, meticulously collected data pointing to falsified patient records, suspicious death certificates, and, most chillingly, a deep dive into an alleged organ trafficking operation running through St. Matthews. The files implicated multiple senior staff members, suggesting organs harvested from poor or marginalized patients were being routed to high-profile, wealthy clients, bypassing all legal protocols. Adrian's colleagues, when questioned by the police, described him as paranoid and unstable in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. He was talking about some grand conspiracy, one surgeon recalled, nervously wiping sweat from his brow, claiming someone inside the hospital is hiding something. I thought he was suffering from burnout. Hospital management echoed the sentiment, dismissing the idea of a conspiracy as the product of Adrian's delusional stress. But Emily saw the truth in the thousands of data points he had risked everything to collect. Her husband hadn't run away. He had been working on something too big, too dangerous. The early investigation floundered. The police, faced with a powerful institution denying any wrongdoing and a grieving widow's circumstantial evidence, quickly lost momentum. Emily's tearful media appeals for information went unanswered. The missing persons case went cold, shelved in the vast archives of the Chicago Police Department. Then, just as the case was about to go cold, an anonymous tip pointed police toward the hospital's restricted storage wing, hinting at a place where secrets went to die. The anonymous call, a muffled voice on a disposable cell, provided a single, cryptic instruction. Check the old surgical wing, Ward 7, the one shut down for renovations. Look in the walls. Detectives, intrigued enough by the bizarre tip, secured a warrant. They entered the restricted Ward 7, an unused surgical wing that had been collecting dust and silence for years. It was eerie, a place frozen in time, smelling of stale disinfectant and disuse. They found outdated surgical tools rusting on trolleys, dusty patient files dating back to 2017 and 2018, and a series of staff lockers in a rarely accessed janitorial closet. In one locker, labeled only with a faded number, they found a surgical coat. It was stiff, stained with old, dark blood. The stitching on the breast pocket was meticulous, high quality, clearly belonging to a senior physician. The ID tag on the coat's loop was missing, deliberately ripped off and replaced by a blank, anonymous staff badge, as if to erase the coat's owner. Forensic analysis of the coat was painstaking. DNA testing confirmed the primary blood sample belonged to Adrian Holt. A secondary, fainter sample was also present, belonging to an unknown female. But the most disturbing finding was the pattern of the blood. It wasn't a spray or a splatter consistent with a violent struggle. It was a soaked-in stain, consistent with someone who had been bleeding out, possibly while being moved. There was no body, no weapon, only the blood-soaked coat and the chilling certainty that Adrian Holt had met a violent end within these sterile walls. Who was the other person whose DNA was on the coat? And why was the blood pattern inconsistent with a struggle, suggesting a surgical or controlled setting? The blood-stained coat gave Emily a moment of confirmation, but no closure. The discovery led to weeks of intense, but ultimately fruitless investigation. The hospital's security footage from that wing in 2018 was mysteriously corrupted, a common problem, the administration claimed. The DNA of the unknown woman led to a dead end. It belonged to a patient who had passed away shortly after surgery in 2018. The case stalled again, settling into the familiar, agonizing cold. Emily's life became a silent landscape of grief and suspicion. She raised her daughter, who often looked up at her mother with Adrian's intense eyes, asking questions her mother couldn't answer. Emily continued her work as a pathologist, ironically returning to the same institution she now viewed as a gilded cage of secrets. She lost credibility among former colleagues. They saw her not as Dr. Carter, the respected forensic expert, but as Adrian's widow, clinging to a conspiracy theory to rationalize her loss. St. Matthew's quietly replaced Adrian, and life, as it always does, moved on for everyone else. A montage of news reports played out in her mind. The initial frantic search, the fading posters, the official police statement classifying the case as inactive. Years passed, marked by the slow, painful realization that she might never know the truth. Emily became a one-woman investigative team, filing endless Freedom of Information Act requests, hitting brick walls of legal obstruction and administrative denial. She knew the truth was still here, inside St. Matthew's, but it was buried deeper than any grave. She was losing hope, preparing to accept the crushing weight of permanent uncertainty. Until one day, 5 years after Adrian walked out of the hospital for the last time, a phone call from the hospital would change everything. It was a Monday morning in 2023. Emily was in her lab when the call came. Dr. Rodriguez, her voice strained and professional, requested an immediate consult. Dr. Carter, we've made a discovery in or 3. Something unusual. It pertains to an old case. Emily rushed to the operating suite. Dr. Rodriguez, eyes wide with residual shock, held out the object, the laminated ID card. Dr. Adrian Holt. The patient was Mr. Thomas Bell, an elderly man in his 70s undergoing a routine second-stage surgery. According to his records, Mr. Bell had undergone a complicated appendectomy in late June 2018, the exact period surrounding Adrian's disappearance. The ID card had been sealed within a tight wad of surgical gauze, intentionally tucked deep into the fatty tissue of the abdominal cavity, perfectly preserved, almost like a time capsule. It had been missed on all subsequent routine X-rays due to its location and the density of the surrounding tissue, only becoming visible on a high-resolution scan immediately preceding the second surgery. Forensics confirmed the ID card was genuine, not a modern replica. It bore the microscopic signs of having been exposed to human tissue for years, and the gauze wrapped around it was consistent with the standard surgical dressings used at St. Matthew's in 2018. It was impossible for it to have been planted recently. The implication was staggering. Adrian Holt's ID, a piece of his identity, was surgically placed inside a living patient who had been operated on just days after he vanished. Had Holt somehow placed it there himself, a desperate, last-ditch effort to leave a message before he was silenced? Or had someone, his killer, placed it there, a morbid, taunting signature of a crime hidden in plain sight? The identity of the patient, Mr. Bell, and the timing of his 2018 surgery put the ID's insertion firmly within the 2-week window of Adrian's disappearance. The secret was no longer in the hospital walls. It was in the body of a patient. The discovery of the ID forced the Chicago Police Department to reopen the Adrian Holt case as an active homicide investigation. The leverage of a single, physical piece of evidence found inside a living person was impossible to ignore. The hospital, however, maintained a facade of shocked cooperation while subtly stonewalling every inquiry. They insisted the ID was a bizarre, inexplicable error, likely dropped during a frantic trauma surgery. Investigators immediately targeted the operating room where Mr. Bell's 2018 appendectomy took place, OR 5. They demanded the security footage, only to be met with the same excuse. The archival footage was corrupted, erased due to a server migration error. This time, Emily intervened, using her forensic expertise and her history with the hospital's IT systems. She knew the backup architecture. With a court order and an outside tech specialist, they recovered fragmented data from a rarely accessed tertiary backup drive. The fragments were incomplete, glitching, but devastating. They showed footage of OR 5 in the early hours of the morning following Adrian's disappearance. The footage showed Dr. Adrian Holt not operating, but being operated on. He was on the table, heavily sedated. Standing over him was a team, led by none other than Senior Administrator Dr. Leonard Voss, the man who had dismissed Adrian as delusional. Voss, looking frantic and grim, was directing the surgery. Dr. Voss himself had vanished for 2 months shortly after that incident, claiming a medical sabbatical before quietly returning. Further investigation, driven by the recovered files on Adrian's flash drive, confirmed the horrifying truth. Adrian had been right. He was about to expose a high-level network involved in illegal organ transplants, trafficking organs sourced from vulnerable, often undocumented, individuals. The ID card was not a mistake. It was a macabre signature. Adrian had been caught preparing to expose the network, subdued, and operated on. The ID was planted in a patient's body to mark the finality of his end, a silent, sick joke to scare any would-be investigator. And the ID wasn't the only thing hidden inside patients. The fragments of recovered footage, coupled with the ID, broke the hospital's wall of silence. A former surgical nurse, driven by guilt and fear, finally came forward as an anonymous whistleblower. Her account was the final, brutal piece of the puzzle. Adrian Holt had not been preparing to run away. He had been preparing a full dossier for the FBI. He was caught by Voss and his accomplices in a restricted storage area near Ward 7, the same place the blood-stained coat was found. He was subdued, likely with an anesthetic gas, and transferred to Ward 5. The operation was a controlled, medical execution. He was fully sedated to prevent any struggle. Voss and his team harvested viable organs from Adrian. A final, ironic, and horrific act of cruelty before disposing of his body. The nurse claimed that Adrian's remains were incinerated in the hospital's high-capacity crematorium, usually reserved for medical waste and unclaimed cadavers, leaving no trace. Voss, she claimed, then personally took Adrian's ID card and, during Mr. Bell's minor appendectomy the next day, slipped it into the patient's abdomen, sealing the card in surgical gauze. It was an audacious, unthinkable act, a warning, a threat, and a sick demonstration of power, burying the evidence of his crime inside a living human being who would never know. The truth was out. Dr. Adrian Holt did not vanish. He was silenced, medically murdered, and his body incinerated to protect a criminal enterprise masquerading as a medical institution. Emily demanded the case be upgraded to multiple counts of homicide and conspiracy. The emotional climax arrived when Adrian's daughter, now a teenager, stood before the press, her voice trembling but clear. She delivered a tearful, eloquent plea for justice, clutching a photograph of her father. "My dad wasn't just a surgeon," she said, her voice echoing the intensity of her father's gaze. "He was a hero. He saw the darkness and tried to bring it to light. They tried to bury him, but the truth he left behind, it survived. It was found inside a patient. Please, help us find everyone who did this." The hospital's cover-up went deeper than anyone imagined, involving powerful people shielded by wealth and status. The ID, the symbol of the very man they destroyed, was the weapon that finally brought them down. But even now, not everyone who was involved has been found. The public outcry was immediate and seismic. Police issued new warrants. Dr. Leonard Voss, tipped off, was initially discovered to have fled the country, but a global manhunt was immediately initiated. Several other high-level staff members involved in the record-keeping and surgical cover-up were arrested. St. Matthew's Medical Center faced criminal charges and a barrage of lawsuits. The institution itself was shattered, its reputation irrevocably destroyed. Emily, heartbroken but finally vindicated, published Adrian's encrypted files online, ensuring his work could never be buried again. The data became a public record, exposing the full, chilling extent of the illegal organ trafficking network. Dr. Adrian Holt didn't just vanish. He was silenced for trying to save lives not just on the operating table, but from his own corrupt colleagues. But even from the grave, His discovery forced the world to see what it refused to believe. The piece of plastic, tucked inside an old man's abdomen, was the last, desperate act of a man fighting the darkness. It is a chilling reminder that the greatest acts of betrayal can occur in places of ultimate trust. How many stories like this remain hidden inside the walls of institutions we rely on? Adrian Holt's dedication to truth cost him everything, but it ultimately served a final justice. What would you have done if you were in his place, realizing the danger only after you had seen too much? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if this story shocked you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true crime investigations that reveal the unthinkable.